My Lai Massacre. The My Lai Massacre occurred during the Vietnam War, where U.S. soldiers from the American Division entered the village of My Lai believing it was filled with Viet Cong fighters. Instead, it was full of unarmed civilians, mostly women, children, and the elderly. Despite realizing this, soldiers opened fire systematically. Villagers were shot in fields, homes, and ditches. Many women were raped before being killed. At least 347 to 504 civilians were murdered that day. Helicopter pilot Hugh Thompson eventually intervened, ordering his crew to protect civilians and threatening to fire on U.S. troops if they continued the killings. His report exposed the truth. While the massacre shocked the world, only one officer, Lieutenant William Calley, was convicted, and he served just over 3 years under house arrest. Haditha Massacre. In 2005, in the Iraqi city of Haditha, U.S. Marines killed 24 Iraqi civilians after one of their convoys was attacked by a roadside bomb. The dead included women, children, and even an elderly man in a wheelchair. The military initially claimed the civilians died in the explosion, but video evidence later proved otherwise. They were executed inside their homes. This led to international outrage and investigations. Despite overwhelming evidence, most charges were dropped, and the only conviction resulted in no jail time. Samar Campaign. During the Philippine-American War, U.S. forces launched a brutal campaign on the island of Samar after a surprise attack by Filipino resistance fighters. General Jacob H. Smith ordered his troops to kill everyone over the age of 10. Villages were burned, crops destroyed, and civilians starved. Thousands died from violence, famine, or disease as part of a scorched earth policy intended to crush local resistance. Nisour Square Massacre. In 2007, private military contractors from Blackwater opened fire on civilians in Baghdad's Nisour Square. 17 people were killed, including children, and over 20 others were wounded. Witnesses said civilians were trying to flee when they were attacked. The incident became a symbol of the dangers of privatized military force with little accountability. After years of legal battles, several contractors were convicted, but later received presidential pardons. Abu Ghraib. At the Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq, U.S. personnel abused detainees suspected of insurgency. Photographs later revealed prisoners being beaten, humiliated, stripped naked, and psychologically tortured. Some were subjected to extreme stress positions and mock executions. The images became a global symbol of misconduct and human rights violations involving U.S. military and intelligence operations. While a few soldiers faced punishment, many higher-level officials avoided accountability. Operation Speedy Express took place in Vietnam's Mekong Delta between 1968 and 1969. The objective was to eliminate enemy fighters, but pressure to produce high body counts led to indiscriminate killing of civilians. Helicopter gunships and artillery struck villages suspected of harboring Viet Cong forces. Civilian deaths were estimated in the thousands, and many were falsely reported as enemy combatants. No Gun Ri Massacre. During the Korean War, refugees fleeing combat areas near No Gun Ri were ordered by U.S. forces to stay off the roads due to fears that enemy soldiers disguised as civilians might infiltrate. Panic and confusion escalated when U.S. soldiers opened fire on the refugees sheltering under a railroad bridge. Between 150 and 300 civilians, minus including many families, were killed. Decades later, an official apology was issued, but survivors called it incomplete. Sand Creek Massacre. On November 29, 1864, troops under Colonel John Chington rode toward a Native American camp of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people. Chief Black Kettle had moved his people there after being told it was safe, and he raised a U.S. flag with a white flag underneath it to show peace. Many of the warriors were away, and most of the people in camp were too old or too young to fight. Despite this, Chivington soldiers attacked. Witnesses later described women and children being shot at close range, people cut apart with knives, babies killed, and bodies mutilated for trophies. One account told of a child wandering in the sand while soldiers took turns trying to shoot him. Another described fingers and ears cut off for jewelry and the body of Chief White Antelope butchered. By the time the killing ended, most of the dead were women and children. Chington claimed that 500 to 600 warriors were killed, boasting about the number. But other sources said the real number was closer to 150, with about 2/3 women and children. The soldiers suffered far fewer losses. Before leaving, they looted the lodges and returned to kill some of the wounded. The reason why this massacre happened in the first place is even sadder. In the 1851 Fort Laram Treaty, the U.S. recognized a large Cheyenne and Arapaho homeland. But after the Colorado Gold Rush and new migration, They asked the natives for more land than was agreed, and a small group of chiefs signed the Fort Wise Treaty, ceding most of the land to appease the U.S. Many Cheyenne, though, rejected it as invalid and tensions rose. The governor told friendly Indians to gather near forts in order to stay safe. And Colonel Chinkton himself, while he declared openly that he had come to kill Indians, told those seeking peace to come under military protection at Fort Lyon. That's exactly what Black Kettle did, following his instructions, but his people were pushed out. He still believed the U.S. and white flags would protect them, but the massacre happened in Colorado and Washington. The story was first reported as a victory, but the truth quickly surfaced. 3 investigations followed, including a congressional inquiry that called it a foul and dastardly massacre. Officers and scouts testified about the killings and mutilations. Captain Soule, who had refused to fire, gave evidence and was murdered shortly after in Denver. Despite the findings, no one was court-martialed. Chinkton had already resigned. And while his career ended in disgrace, he avoided legal punishment. A later treaty at the Little Arkansas promised survivors land access and reparations, but those promises were soon broken and replaced with much smaller reservations. Philippines' concentration camps. During the Philippine-American War, concentration camps were used in Batangas, and one American officer described them as some suburb of hell. You'll soon understand why. Back then, General James Franklin Bell took command of U.S. forces in that area, and his goal was to starve the rebels and cut them off from any support. However, since there were many civilians there, they decided to put them into heavily guarded camps as their homes, fields, and animals were destroyed. All civilians were required to carry identification papers, and anyone found outside the camps without them could be shot on the spot. Bell himself said neutrality should not be tolerated, which meant that everyone was either an enemy or a friend, and anyone accused of helping the rebels risked execution. Conditions inside the camps were catastrophic. People were packed together in crowded spaces with poor sanitation, which made diseases spread quickly. Cholera, smallpox, Barbary, and even bubonic plague killed thousands. Food was also scarce, and some soldiers described groups of men being forced to dig their own graves before being executed, with the excuse that keeping them alive would take food away from U.S. troops. Torture was also performed, such as waterboarding. The death toll was incredible. Between January and April 1902, 8,350 people died in the camps. In some camps, as many as 1 out of every 5 prisoners died. To calm public anger in the United States, the Army's top public relations officer tried to defend the camps. He claimed they were meant to protect friendly natives, feed them, and teach them better hygiene. However, this claim collapsed when reports from inside the camp surfaced with letters from soldiers and witnesses.